Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of Premier League Predictions, where myself, Chris Cowlin, and I'm also joined by Gareth McGuiness. We'll be looking ahead to this weekend's games in the Premier League. One game will take place on Friday, 5 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, and then Newcastle v Liverpool on Monday evening. Now, we're live on YouTube, live on X and Facebook, so please do get your score predictions in as well, and we'll get as many as possible on screen, as Gareth and I will be talking about all 10 Premier League games this coming weekend. Gareth, how are you?
Oh, good, Chris. Probably as good as we can be as Spurs fans right now, I suppose. Obviously, it was a damaging last 24 hours. There are transfer plans this summer, but look, the best thing we can do is look forward to the Premier League games this weekend and hopefully get some good news afterwards about how we're going to approach this final week in the window, because I probably speak for all Spurs fans and yourself, Chris, we desperately need business done in the next 10 days.
Absolutely. Well, we're here to talk about the Premier League games. It took Gareth, I think, 90 seconds to talk about transfers, but we will talk about Spurs in a second. Gareth, before we talk about the first game of Matchweek 2, West Ham against Chelsea on Friday evening, any standout games for you? Matchweek 1, Premier League is back. It seems like it's been back for ages now, but we've only had one game per Premier League team. Spurs, of course, got off to a flying start. What did you make of Matchweek 1? And of course, Richarlison was Player of the Week.
Well, from a neutral point of view, obviously I'm a Spurs fan, but from a neutral point of view, I think it started with an absolute bang. I mean, Liverpool and Bournemouth was probably the game of the weekend.
Yeah. I
think gradually then we didn't see that kind of level of excitement and quality in any other game, really. I thought that was a really, really great average for the Premier League and a real strong start. I mean, Liverpool, raced into a 2-0 lead out in the second half, and you're thinking, well, are they going to really show why everyone feels they're favourites for the league? But credit to Bournemouth, they dug in, and once they got back to 2-1, deservedly got level. But Liverpool finished strong like they always do at Anfield, and you kind of sensed a goal would come, and it did, from an unlikely source in Chiesa, who I think that was his first Premier League goal despite being there last year. And obviously Salah always has a say on the opening day of the season. I think that's every weekend. Opening weekend he scored in, and it took him to the 94th minute. They do it this time, but unbelievable player, and Liverpool get off to a cracking start. Of course, Spurs, a great start for them, 3-0, as you say, Richarlison. Brilliant for him. I mean, I was listening to the commentary, and he says it's great to see Richarlison smiling again. And then, of course, he gets subbed off, and the Richarlison frown returns. And look, United and Arsenal was the star game of the weekend before. I was really impressed with Man United. I have to say, I thought Arsenal were fortunate. Yes, they defended well, but on another day, United definitely could have got a result. And I think Gary Neville released a lot of stats on the Monday Night Football about, it was our highest possession against a top 3 team and most shots against a top 3 team, because we've normally associated Man United with being a counter-attack team and those big games, but it was probably the first time in a long time they actually took the game to Arsenal, and Arsenal were the team on the back foot. So I think there's a lot of a good platform for Man United to build on again in that Arsenal game, and of course Arsenal will definitely, you definitely imagine they'll improve. But that was the main takeaways from the weekend, Chris.
Also, Gareth, a real statement win for Manchester City, who of course Spurs have got on Saturday, winning 4-0 away at Wolves. And what a fantastic start to the Premier League campaign. Newly promoted Sunderland beating West Ham 3-0. Yeah,
Man City looked really impressive at times. I think Wolves still had opportunities up until Man City got that first goal. I mean, Wolves had a few chances. I think the goal ruled out for offside, and they looked dangerous in the transition. I think Man City, Pep will definitely know that that's still an area they need to work on. They're very vulnerable to transition counterattacks. Whereas you look at teams like Arsenal, I think are a lot more defensively sound, but maybe aren't playing with a flair and the kind of excitement that Man City are. I think Rangers had an unbelievable debut. Arguably the performance of the weekend, considering it was his first Premier League game. I know Richarlison is up there as well because of his performance, but I was really impressed with Rangers. And kind of with them losing De Bruyne, you're thinking who's going to be that star midfielder for Man City, because we know Rodri's more of a defensive player, and Rangers looks, top quality. So Man City fans will be excited about him. And as you say, Sunderland, we both did top Sunderland they won, but probably not as convincing as they did. A really, really strong performance from them. And look, there's a lot of teams that are unhappy with the business they've done in the window, but Sunderland fans must be absolutely buzzing with the ambition and the level of player they've brought in. Probably the most ambitious promoted team's been for a long time, and they got the rewards with that opening day one. And I believe they're still looking for more. So if you're a Sunderland fan at the moment, you're looking up, not down.
Absolutely. Yeah, many congratulations to them getting off to a flying start. You hardly see that nowadays, a newly promoted team getting such a statement win on the opening weekend.
Let's talk about... That was the first time in a long time. I think it may have been 7 or 8 years where 2 promoted teams won on the opening weekend.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Well. Yeah. Right, let's crack on. Let's talk about match week 2. West Ham United host Chelsea at London Stadium on Friday evening. Now, this fixture last season on the 21st of September finished West Ham United 0, Chelsea 3. And Chelsea have won 5 of their last 7 Premier League meetings against West Ham, drawing 1 and losing 1, and overall have 32 wins in the competition against the Hammers, only beating Spurs more often, and that is 37. Sorry about that stat, but it's facts. So West Ham v Chelsea. Chelsea last weekend 0-0 draw against Crystal Palace at home. I know they would have probably been disappointed with that, but Palace made things extremely difficult for them. And that's what's so great about this Oliver Glasner team, because they work so hard for one another and make it very difficult for the opponent to beat them. West Ham, we've just spoken about, lost 3-0 away at Sunderland. We spoke a little bit last week, Gareth, about Graham Potter being under pressure. I tell you what, they've got to pick points up, haven't they? Because if Chelsea, win like they did last season, and like that stat that I've just read out, they have such a fantastic record against West Ham. I know the West Ham fans are going to be far from happy losing this game against Chelsea.
Well, I think the manner of the defeat against the newly promoted team is what will really, really worry West Ham fans. Everyone can lose a game, but they folded like a cheap tent in that second half. And that is going to be what's of massive concern to the board as well. I mean, Karen Brady has publicly backed Graham Potter after that, but we've seen this before where chairmans and owners back managers, and if results don't turn within a few weeks, all of a sudden that backing doesn't exist because they're removed from their position. And look, I really worry for West Ham. I think they're going to struggle massively. I think there's a real imbalance in their squad. They really lack legs in midfield. And I think when you're getting overrun and outpowered by a newly promoted team, who are pretty new to the league, let's be honest, this isn't a team that's bounced back from a like Sunderland. They've been out of the Premier League for a long time. And to be put to the sword in the second half like they were is a massive worry. I mean, we know Antonio's a huge loss. Kudos is obviously a huge loss. I'm looking at the business they've done, and nothing about it seems right. And I think it's going to be a really tough season for West Ham. And it doesn't look like they're going to be able to do much in the next 10 days or so in the window. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on Jared Bowen to score goals. And if anything was to happen with him, Chris, like any sort of injury, I think West Ham could be dragged into a dogfight. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a Spurs fan, but, they didn't have a great season last year. And it just seems that there's no real buzz around West Ham at the moment. I think a lot of the fans seem very disinterested with the direction they're going in. And I really can't see any other type of victory on Friday night other than a comfortable Chelsea one. And I know Chelsea struggled to break down Palace, but Palace and West Ham are completely different opponents at the moment. Crystal Palace, I think, will give most teams, when they play against any of them big six or traditional top six, as they say, I think they'll be very, very difficult to beat. I don't think West Ham will be difficult to beat.
Score prediction?
I'm going to go for a 3-0 Chelsea one, same as last year.
Do you know what? I think Chelsea will win this. I'm going to go for a smaller win. I'm going to go 1-0. 1-0 Chelsea. You're going to go 3-0 Chelsea. But I feel like Chelsea are just going to have so much, too much for West Ham. Yeah.
I think the worry will be if Chelsea were to score early, Chris, I think it could get really ugly. West Ham
Yeah.
need to try and keep it as tight as possible, maybe nick a goal and make it difficult. But I think if Chelsea break them down early, they've got so much talent where the game has to open up. I think West Ham could be in huge trouble.
Yeah, and we know that the fans can show their discontent because they've gone through so many managers as well. I know we as Spurs fans talk about how many managers we've gone through, but West Ham over the years, they've gone through a lot. Right, next up, the Saturday games, the early kickoff at the Etihad, Manchester City v Tottenham. Of course, City got off to a flying start, winning 4-0, as I mentioned earlier, at Wolves. Spurs got off to a flying start, the perfect start, in fact, beating Burnley 3-0. I know some people have said, well, it's only Burnley, but like I always say, Gareth, I don't know it's boring, but it's true. There is no easy games in the Premier League. And when you look at the, newly promoted teams from last year, the likes of Leicester and Ipswich, Spurs lost those games. So, they were difficult games for us last year. And it seems like we're 3 points up. But Thomas Frank got off to the perfect start, a clean sheet, 3 goals. Richarlison, that second Richarlison goal was an absolute worldie, absolutely fantastic. Let me give you a stat for this one. And by the way, at the Etihad last season, we beat City 4-0. It was a real statement win that under Ange Postecoglou. Manchester City have won just 4 of their last 12 Premier League games against Spurs, drawing 2 and losing 6. They beat them 1-0 in the last meeting in Feb. They last secured consecutive league wins against Spurs between December 2017 and April 2019, which was 4. And pretty much since then, Gareth, 2019, we have been a real pain in the backside to Pep Guardiola and Man City.
Yeah, I mean, and they think that Thomas Frank's now in charge because I think Thomas Frank's had a lot of results at Brentford against Pep. So it's not just Spurs now that he'll be worried about. It's also Thomas Frank. I think Brentford done the double over them a couple of seasons ago as well. They ended that long unbeaten record at home. Ivan Toney scored a last-minute goal. They beat Man City 2-1 just before the break for the World Cup. So this will give Pep Guardiola the shingles, I think, because Thomas Frank has been a master at setting up tactical plans. They beat Man City, and he's now got a better quality of player to do it with. So Pep will know that this is going to be a very difficult game, and for whatever reason, I don't know, Spurs seem to have this kind of upper hand over Man City, despite the success that Man City have had in all those years under Pep. So, I mean, Spurs fans are going to this with confidence because of that previous record. And if you think about, we lost to Ipswich last season before we went to the Etihad, no one really gave us a prayer, and we go 1-4-0 and probably could have won by more. I'm not sure have Man City fixed those problems where they were very vulnerable in transitions, and I think Thomas Frank will really target those transitions. I think it'll be very similar to the PSG game where they're not really too fussed about having possession. I think you'll see a lot of Vicarios kicks go long, and Spurs from set pieces might be able to hurt Man City as well. So it's going to be Thomas Frank's first real Premier League test because, no disrespect to Burnley, we were expected to win that game. Can Thomas Frank deliver in the first game we're going to be second favourites on? He done a very good job against PSG. Unfortunately, lost out in penalties. But, if that was a league game in the Champions League against PSG, I think people would have been more than happy with a point against the European champions. So I have a lot of confidence for this game. I know there's been a lot of turmoil off the pitch in the last 24 hours with the Eze deal, but I think this could be the perfect way to maybe blow a bit of cobwebs off and get a 1 against Man City, and then can we fix this transfer pickle we're in the last week? But I'm feeling confident enough we can do it again.
I'll ask you about the Eze one in a minute. We can't talk about Spurs without mentioning this Eze thing. So we'll mention that in a minute. But let me give you this stat: the last 4 Premier League meetings between City and Spurs at the Etihad have produced 21 goals, 9 for City, 12 for Spurs, with the away side netting at least twice in all 4. We know, Gareth, that there's going to be goals in this game. Do you know what? You might be surprised here. I'm going to go for a 3-3 draw.
Yeah, it was 3-3 2 seasons ago, last month, because she goal as well. There has been a lot of goals in these games, but I actually think it won't be as many, just for the fact that I don't think we will be as adventurous even when we do counter-attack. I think there'll be a lot of making sure we're not caught ourselves. I think Thomas Frank will be very keen to make sure we don't concede 2 goals and then having to score 2 or 3 to get a result. So I'm going to go from Spurs 1, Man City 1, Spurs 2.
Wow. You're going for a Spurs win. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Let's, on a very serious note, let's get your thoughts on the Eze saga. Of course, we got the here we go last night from Fabrizio Romano, him going to Arsenal. They've hijacked this deal. What do you make of it, Gareth? It's truly disappointing, isn't it? Having lost out on Morgan Gibbs-White and now having lost out on Eberechi Eze. And, my real issue and my real worry, in fact, is what is next. We've seen on the likes of X, a number of reliable journalists coming out and saying that, we're now after various other players. Tyler Diblin is in there as well. What do you make of this?
Well, Chris, last Wednesday outside the stadium for LA, we done that video and you called it, you named it That Sick Feeling, Oh Not Again. And it kind of felt like we had that sick feeling again last night, but this time it was off the pitch. And it just seems to be that we end up getting sucker punched every time we're in a position of strength. 2-0 up against PSG, can't see it out. Then we lose out in Gibbs-White, and you think, well, can we get this one over the line? Everyone's telling you that it's going to happen, and then Arsenal come in and sweep in, and before you know it, it's not a battle that it was over. He'd already made his mind up; it was going to Arsenal, and we get that sick feeling again. And now, having missed out on our 2 top number 10 targets, where does that leave us? The only one I can really think about in the Premier League that's could possibly be available, might even cost more than what Eze and Gibbs-White would have been, is Morgan Rogers. I think anything other than him is going to be a struggle to appease the fans. If it is at Tyler Dublin, he's a young player, he's talent, but he's not ready to be your number 10 in the Champions League and Premier League. He's just not ready for that. There's other players like Nico Paz, and I've just not heard enough or seen enough about them. The lad at Monaco has been linked as well. Alanucci, is it?
The sad thing is for me, Gareth, I think that, and I think most people are going to feel this way. Whoever does come in now, it is going to seem like a downgrade to someone like Eze.
Yeah, well, that's it. Unless it is Morgan Rogers, who I think's on a par with Eze and possibly got a few more years to give because Eze's a bit older. But look, we're all very disappointed with the transfer recruitment. The team involved, Daniel Levy, Johan Langer, Vinay's involved there as well. And Daniel Levy takes the brunt of it, of course. He's the figurehead at the top of the club. And I'm not going to make any excuses for him, but it does seem that Eze had his heart set on Arsenal. Was he only joining Spurs because Arsenal wasn't an option? I don't know, Gareth.
They've had a few weeks to sort this deal out, and the fact that Arsenal came in and done it so quickly, I just think is really, really disappointing. And from a business point of view, I just can't get my head round the way that they have let that deal slip through the net, and the way that they just didn't close the deal, because Arsenal acted like a big club. They had an injury to Havertz, and they acted so quickly, and that's what's really disappointing. Not only did we not get the player's now gone to our biggest rivals, and the fact that we just did not act quick enough and do this quick enough. It's really frustrating. And this isn't the first time it's happened.
No, and this is it, Chris, and this can continue to happen, or we're never going to be able to build any momentum as a club. You thought that Europa League victory in Bilbao would have been the one for the club to springboard on, and it just hasn't materialised. We've lost out in Gibbs-White, we've lost out on Eberechi Eze, and now we're struggling. And let's be honest, the club didn't plan for this, so now we are scraping and trying to get somebody in that can come in. And look, every club knows what we're looking for as well, so the price goes up.
Yep.
Are the club going to fix this mistake, or is it going to be too expensive a mistake to fix, and are we going to be left with another young player that isn't ready, and the squad looks short as it has done for a long time in these type of competitions? Daniel Levy statement back in June was, we want to compete on all 4 fronts. At the moment, that is not possible for Thomas Frank. So is Thomas Frank going to be liable if we're unable to compete on all 4 fronts? And I think that's where the frustration comes with the fans, that the manager ultimately gets the sack for failings above him.
Gareth, give me a quick yes or no. The Independent have stated that a bid is being prepared. Tottenham are willing to pay €80 million, the equivalent of £69.2 million for Savinho. Worth it, yes or no?
I think based on his potential and this type of market, yes. I think he probably needs to have more output in front of goal in terms of goals. But I think his assist numbers were quite high last year. I think he got 16 assists for Man City. So, and it may suit a more direct team where we're getting the ball into the box quite quickly, as we pointed out on the tactical video yesterday. Kudos already got 2 assists. We're scoring a lot of goals from set pieces, and we look dangerous from long throws as well. So I think crossing is going to be a massive part of Thomas Frank's plan. So it may suit Savinho more than maybe playing intricate passes. If he can kind of whip balls into the box, we may be more suited to him than Man City are at the moment. I think 70 million, near enough there, what you're saying, probably asked the question of Man City. But we know Man City they're not the easiest to deal with. They always get high fees for their players. So they'll know our situation and know how desperate we are. It wouldn't be surprised if they come back and say we want another 5, 6, 7 million, and then it becomes more difficult for the club. But this is the club's fault, and if they had have acted properly, we wouldn't be in this situation.
I understand their viewpoint entirely, because when they let Cole Palmer go, of course, he has become into an absolute superstar, one of the best players in the Premier League right now, one of the best players in the world even. And they don't want to see that happen again, of them selling a real asset and them becoming a real superstar. And I actually think that will happen. I actually think that Savinho will be a fantastic signing for Tottenham. And when you talk about transfer fees, I think a lot of people, a lot of fans automatically look at that figure and think, wow, that's a lot of money based on like years ago. But, the way that the figures are now, I actually feel like that is the market value for a player like that, and the deliveries that he could put in on the other side. And, we haven't even spoken about Mohamed Kudus. I know we haven't got all day to be talking about the Spurs game. We're here to talk about the other.
I think this deal will come down to 2 things. We know Savinho's keen to join because he wants to play in the World Cup next year, and he wants regular football. But I think it'll come down to 2 things: how much we're willing to pay and how much Man City can get Rodrigo for, because it's well documented that Rodrigo would be their target. If Rodrigo's possible, it may persuade them to part with Savinho. If they don't feel they can get an adequate replacement and the time that's left, I don't really see any value in Man City selling him, because I believe this player, they could get 70 million for him next year anyway.
Yeah. I mentioned this on the fan show Wednesday evening about I just hope that we don't get to the stage where we're then playing Mohamed Kudus in that number 10 role, because Thomas Frank spoke about that recently, where he could play number 10. And Gareth, from the crosses that he put in for Richarlison last weekend against Burnley, he is going to be a real threat on that right-hand side. And, what deliveries he can put in, and the way he beats his man, a top player, and we need him out on that wing. So we don't need him in that number 10, although I think he'll be great in that number 10.
The most frustrating thing for Spurs fans is we see this all the time: players having to play out of positions because we haven't got enough players to cover in a certain. We've seen Kulusevski having to play in 3 different positions last year. He had to play up front at one stage, I think, in a game, because we were so short. And no other top club operates like that. They've got players. Look, people are saying, maybe Arsenal don't really need it, Eze, but they're making sure they've got an Eze and their squad in case they get injuries. And, I would love us to get to that stage where we're signing players going, oh, where's he going to fit in? No, because at the moment we're struggling to fill certain positions. So, no, for me, massive slap in the face again. How we respond now is getting 3 points against Man City and getting some business done next week. So after this international break, we're ready for the Champions League, because that draws next Thursday, Chris. And there's going to be a lot of fans next week panicking if we draw out Barcelona, PSG, Real Madrid, Bayern, Everton. We could have some real tough opponents in that. And Thomas Frank will be wondering, how am I going to manage this?
I wouldn't even use that word panic. I just call it realism, because you've got to build a squad to be fighting on all fronts. A term that they use, the club, and Champions League, we know, is far from easy. Gareth, I know we could talk about Spurs all day, but let's move on. Bournemouth v Wolves. What have you made of Bournemouth and Wolves so far? Because, of course, Wolves lost 4-0 at home against City, as I mentioned earlier. Now, Bournemouth have won 3 of their last 5 Premier League games against Wolves, losing 2, though all 3 victories have come at Molineux. And Wolves have never lost in 5 Premier League away games against Bournemouth, winning 3 and drawing 2, making the Cherries the side that they've faced most often on the road without defeat in the competition.
Well, look, Bournemouth really impressed me last week. Going to Anfield on the first night of the season, under the lights, everyone expecting Liverpool to put their stamp on their defence of the title. Plus, they were labelled as favourites. A lot of new players, exciting players like Ekitike and Verts in the team. And you kind of worried for Bournemouth because they've lost players as well. But look, very much similar to Oliver Glasner. I think Andoni Iraola has been a very impressive manager since he's been in the Premier League. Of course, he had that really difficult start last year. Or sorry, not last year. His first season, 2 seasons ago now it would be. And there was kind of calls going, should they have got rid of Gary O'Neill? But Bournemouth were insistent that they were going to stick by him, and they thought they had an upgrade in Andoni Iraola. And you have to say it was an unbelievable decision, because Bournemouth have been a very impressive outfit over the last sort of season and a half. And they've had some massive results at the Vitality. I think they beat Man City, they beat Spurs, they beat Liverpool, they've beat Arsenal. They've had some fantastic results. And they're a team that now, whenever you're playing them, even if you are one of the strongest teams in the league, you know Bournemouth can cause you problems, and they caused Liverpool a lot of problems last week. Semenyo was a real threat. And I think Bournemouth are going to still be a decent outfit, even though they've lost, that whole defence had changed, really. They lost their 2 centre-halves and their left-back, who played for Liverpool on the night. And not a lot had seemed to have been missing from Bournemouth. So I think Bournemouth will steady the ship, maybe get a couple. I think they're signing a couple more players before the window closes, and they'll probably finish somewhere where they did last year, around about mid-table. It'll be interesting to see if our clubs are courting Andoni Iraola after another season in the Premier League. But I think they're going to be a massive threat, the Wolves. And I think Wolves, contrastingly, the Bournemouth are going to be in for a very difficult season. I thought they looked very short against Man City. I know they were playing Man City, who are a top team, but just think when you continually sell your best players every season, and they've not just lost one of their best players, they've lost both of them in Cunha and Al-Nouri, who were their 2 biggest source of goals last year, I believe, along with Strand Larsen. So there's a lot of pressure on Strand Larsen to score goals. And it's only his second season in the Premier League. So as good as a job as a manager has done there, I think he's going to be up against it this year, and Wolves will definitely be fighting for relegation.
Score prediction wise, Gareth, I'm going to go with a 2-1 Bournemouth win. What are you going for?
I'm going to go for a 3-1 Bournemouth one.
Okay, right, let's move on to the next one. Brentford take on Aston Villa. Now, this fixture last season finished Brentford 0, Aston Villa 1. Brentford are winless in their last 6 league games against Aston Villa, drawing 2 and losing 4, and haven't kept a clean sheet in any of their 8 Premier League meetings with Aston Villa. And Aston Villa have won their last 2 away league games against Brentford, having lost 4 of their previous 5 visits beforehand and drawing 1. I said last week that I've been very impressed with Emery, the job that he's done. Brentford, very different outfit, with Thomas Frank going to Spurs.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone sees Brentford as a team that's going to be fighting for relegation this year, just because of the players they've lost. And we spoke about last week, losing their captain in Norgard, losing Mbeumo, Vasa, well, he stays or goes, doesn't want to be there. And of course, Thomas Frank, their leader, who has been a massive part of the reason why they are in the Premier League and have managed to stay in the Premier League. I think that it's going to be a real battle. And Keith Andrews, after that game against Nottingham Forest, when they found themselves 3-0 down at half-time, conceding very unlike Brentford goals, I have to say. I mean, conceded from a set piece, which I think they only conceded 2 from set pieces all of last year, and they conceded the first goal of the new season from a set piece. And then the other 2 goals, it was a real messy display in that first half. And I think Keith Andrews talked about the appetite and the work rate and a lot of naiveness. Probably a lot of people at Brentford, questioning where the club's going, the ones that have been under the previous regime. Keith Andrews, of course, was a set-piece coach there, but big step up. And already it looks maybe that it could be too big for him. His interview after the game, he wasn't happy, and he looked already. You think about a manager, his first job in the Premier League, he should be excited. He looked absolutely deflated. And that will be a massive worry that he hasn't really got the experience at this level. They navigate through such a traumatic and turmoil of a spell of losing all these players. The Vasa situation must be driving the fans crazy, but like Newcastle fans, we sack. So
I was going to ask that, Gareth. We'll talk about Isak in a second when we talk about Newcastle, but the whole Wissa thing, what do you make of these players now just deleting their so-called profiles on their social medias? Wissa has now deleted everything to do with Brentford. He's kept everything else on there, but anything to do with Brentford, he's taken off. What do you make of this? Because these players, at the end of the day, they have contracts. They've got contracts to, they've signed them. They've got a job to do. They're contracted. It's like they just feel like they can say, don't want to play anymore. That's it. I'm off. I want to be off. I want to move. And when they don't get their move, they're going to get upset about it. What do you think will happen with Wissa? Because with the Newcastle situation, a lot of Newcastle fans are saying, well, he's going to be playing for Newcastle again, whether he likes it or not. It doesn't look like he's going to get a move away from St James's Park. But, players can't act like this, can they?
No, I think it's absolutely ridiculous what's going on with these two players. I mean, both of these players were really not heard of before they came to these clubs, especially in Vissa's case. I mean, he's been absolutely excellent for Brentford, and that's the strangest thing about it. That why would you want to tarnish the reputation you've got with the club, the fans, the team, your teammates? He's just decided that, you know what, I'm too big for this club now. I'm going to go to Newcastle, where, funny enough, a lot of players are think that the club's not big enough for them and rejecting them for our clubs. I suppose it's the food chain, but it still doesn't condone the behaviour of these players. They're under contract, like you say. They're not only refusing to play, they're refusing to train at times. Deleting all activity from your social media around the club that you're contracted to is a first. I've never quite seen that before.
Yeah.
And look, I think Brent has probably got to the point where I think these two clubs have just about had enough of these two players, and they're happy to just say, you know what, you've made your bed, you're going to lie on it now, and we're going to keep you as almost like a punishment, because Brentford wanted 50 million for Vissa a few weeks ago, and now it says they want 60. Newcastle have bid 40, and I think Newcastle are probably at their limit in terms of what they believe the player's worth. I know we've spoke about transfer fees, Chris, but I don't really think Vissa's a £60 million player at 29 with 1 year left on his contract. Last year he had an unbelievable season, but up until that he was kind of in the background at Brentford. He was an important player. He wasn't really looked at as a star man because you had Mbeumo there and Ivan Toney was there up to a certain point. So obviously he got more limelight on him last year with Toney had moved on, and now that I think Mbeumo moving on, he was kind of viewed as a star player. So maybe he thinks that because he is the star man in that dressing room now, he can do what he bloody well likes. But for me, it would be a real off-put from a buy-in club. Once they say these players they do well at this next club, and then an our club comes in for them that they believe's a better opportunity, do they do the same? Because somebody told me this week that Isak made it very difficult for Sociedad to keep him to get to Newcastle. So this player's got form for doing this.
Yeah.
So what's they say if Isak goes to Liverpool, has 2 great seasons, and Real Madrid coming from, and he views Real Madrid as a bigger club, what's he going to do to get out of Liverpool? So I think fans have to be very careful with the type of player you're bringing in. We spoke about Eze and Gibbs White, 2 role model professionals where, still up in the air tonight where Eze's going to play in his final game for Crystal Palace. But, the fact that it's even a discussion tells you, the kind of quality and the kind of person he is, that he's coming in. He's not made it difficult for Palace. He was kind of, and Mark Gay, he's another one who says, look, if I don't really get me move, I'm happy to stay at Palace for another season and move next year when my contract's up. So that's the kind of the players you want in the dressing room, not these type of players where any sign of trouble, they're going to blow up. And I think Brentford and Newcastle, really what they should do now is make an example of these players, unless they get the fee that they believe they're worth, which is around 150 for Isak and 60 for Vissa. They should hang on to them and teach them a lesson, because you're under contract at this club, and unless the terms and conditions suit us, not you, unless they suit us, you're staying here.
Gareth, just a very quick yes or no. Would you like to see Wissa at Spurs?
No, I don't think so, because I think with Solanke and Richarlison, we've got 2 better players, providing they both stay fit. I think Vissa, decent player, but I don't really see him as a player that can really take us forward.
Right, Brentford v Aston Villa. I'm going to go for a 2-0 Aston Villa win. What are you going for?
Never really spoke about Villa, so I'll do it very quickly. But I think Villa as well are another team struggling in the market. they were very, very poor against Newcastle, Chris, and that would be a concern to you in Emery that, if you're not refreshing the squad, sometimes it can go a bit stale. So I'm sure Villa will be trying to do something. I know they're a bit tight with PSR. Does that mean that Rodgers could be available if a club comes in for him? I hope so. For our case, if we go and approach Villa, I think because they're playing Brentford, they'll be okay this week. But I have a bad feeling about Villa this year. It could all go very stale if they don't get some players on. I'll go for a 1-0 Villa 1.
It's interesting you speak about the PSR issue because Karen Brady was talking on TalkSport the other day about selling Mohamed Kudus. And I feel like down the line, Gareth, that's probably what a lot of fans are not going to understand by some clubs doing deals because they have to. They're almost forced into selling players.
We've all sold Jacob Ramsey for 40 million to Newcastle, and there's people scratching their head about that. And I think some of the players that come out in social media and says you don't know the half of it, so go easy on Ramsey. But even though they've sold Ramsey, I'm hearing that they still can't do any business. So that tells me that Villa may be still open to some sales before the window goes. And if Spurs are serious, they won there with an £80 million bid, which is kind of what they want. It makes Villa think about it because they can reinvest in our areas.
Right. Next up, 2 newly promoted teams will meet early on in the season in match week 2. Burnley against Sunderland. Of course, Burnley lost 3-0 at Spurs. Sunderland, as we've already mentioned, beat West Ham United 3-0 at the Stadium of Light. Now, Burnley are unbeaten in their 3 Premier League home games against Sunderland, winning 2 and drawing 1. Most recently, a 4-1 victory back in December 2016. Will either of these teams stay up, in your opinion?
I think it's going to be a massive uphill task for Burnley, just based on what I've seen on Saturday. I know they were playing a team that's, considered one of the top teams in the division, but when they had opportunities, they didn't really look like they had the quality. They hurt Spurs. And I think that'll be the major concern, that Burnley are going to have to keep a lot of clean sheets like they did in the Championship against a lot stronger opposition. They have any chance of staying up because I don't really see loads of goals in that Burnley team. And I think that's what Scott Parker's up against this season. And I think if he was to keep them up, it would be one of the best achievements from any manager because I think they're really, really short on quality. And you have to score goals to stay in this league. Sunderland, great start. I think they've got the best opportunity of the 3 promoted clubs to stay up just because of the business that they've done and the experience they've brought on. We don't like him very much as an ex-Arsenal player, but I think Granit Xhaka is the type of character that you need in a dressing room that's not got a lot of experience in the Premier League. That can maybe that people can learn off him, and he does seem to have settled down as well, and he doesn't seem as much of a flight risk as he used to be. So I think he could be vital to their campaign. But Sunderland will definitely be looking at. I think it's a bit funny this year because I think with the struggles that Brentford have had and Wolves have had, I think it might be easier for the promoted teams to stay up. So maybe Sunderland have been fortunate that they've come up at the right time. And maybe they've struck on the irons hot with the business they've done. So Sunderland definitely, I think, have a real opportunity. Burnley, I think, are going to struggle.
Gareth, you might be surprised here, but my score prediction for this one is going to be 0-0.
No, it doesn't surprise me. I think that'll be the only way Burnley can maybe get a result or nick a 1-0. I mean, if it ends up being an open game, I think Sunderland have more quality. But no, I think it'll be tight enough. But I'm just going to go with Sunderland. They bowled on that opening day 1 with a 2-1 victory.
2-1 Sunderland win, yeah?
Yeah.
Right, next up, we're going to be talking about the late kickoff on Saturday, Arsenal against Leeds at the Emirates. It'd be interesting to see whether Eberechi Eze does feature, as you said, for Crystal Palace on Thursday, and then will he make his debut? Because I think his medical is booked for Friday morning. Will he make his debut for Arsenal at the Emirates against Leeds? Now, Leeds beat Everton 1-0 on Monday evening, a late penalty in the 84th minute. How do you see this one going, Gareth? And I hate to ask this and I hate to bring this up, but with the signing of Eze, does it make them even one step more closer to winning the league?
Well, definitely a player Eze's quality coming on makes it more dangerous, isn't it? But my worry would be for Eze, is he going to get playing in his natural favourite position? Because I think even though he's an Arsenal boy and he's, once Arsenal came in, he was always going to want that move. But if Odegaard's fit, and he's rarely injured, let's be honest, Odegaard, he's usually there most weeks. Are they going to drop Odegaard? I don't think Odegaard can play anywhere else, whereas Eze can maybe be shifted out to the left, but I don't think that's his best position. So it'll be interesting to see how Arsenal line up when everyone's fit. I don't expect Eze to play this weekend. I think it'll be too much of a tight turnaround. But, when they go to Anfield next weekend, sure, Eze will have about a week's training and be looking to play. Where does he play? And it's a great sort of problem for a manager to have, I suppose, but it can also cause issues. So it's definitely made their squad stronger, but has it got them any further forward? I think Gyökeres is going to be the key to that, Chris. I think they're going to need him to score a lot of goals. I think that's where they fell short last year. Didn't score enough goals, too many draws, especially at home. And look, let's be honest, it was his first game, but he didn't look anywhere near ready. Of course, plenty of players don't have great debuts and go on to be very successful players for their clubs, but there was
Gareth, sorry, there is news just in the last couple of minutes actually at the time of recording this. Eze is not in the Crystal Palace squad for this evening's game in the Europa Conference League, and that was at the request of Arsenal not to play.
I thought you were going to break big Spurs breaking news there.
No, sorry.
Well, as it says when I was speaking about Eze, that tells me that he's more on board with this Arsenal move than he would have been with our move. But the fact that there's obviously been a conversation that they don't want him to get injured, because Eze doesn't want to get injured, surely, because that could scupper his move. Palace, I think if he had a play tonight, there was still jeopardy around this move. I still think that if the game had maybe not gone the way Palace wanted it to go, would they have maybe kept them another week? They make sure they get through into the league phase. I don't know. But in terms of Arsenal, I think if Gyökeres fires the goals that they're expecting him to do, they can definitely run Liverpool and Man City close. If he doesn't at the heights that they're hoping, I still think they're going to be struggling. They match the output of Man City's goals and Liverpool's goals, and they'll rely a lot on what they did last week at Old Trafford, where it's going to have to be a lot of clean sheet victories. And look, Arsenal fans were saying they were brilliant defensively last week. When you're defending like you are for that length of time, you always need a bit of fortune, and I think at times they got a bit of fortune. A lot of the breaks in the box went to Arsenal players and maybe not a United player. And of course, David Raya made some big saves as well. In terms of this game, Chris, I think they'll get a home win. Leeds were really impressive in that opening first half against Everton. Everton come back on it. Very controversial penalty. It divided a lot of opinion, where it was a penalty or not. But this is a free hit for Leeds. This isn't the type of game that's going to determine where they play in the Premier League or the Championship next season. Leeds will be looking at their home games, especially teams in the bottom half of the table, and they start off beating Everton as a fantastic start. But I don't see them being able to hurt Arsenal the way they hurt Everton at times. So I'm going to go for a 2-0 Arsenal win.
Yeah, I've written down the same 2-0, unfortunately. And by the way, the Times newspaper have just reported in the last 20 minutes that Eze will not start for Crystal Palace on Thursday, but he may still be in the squad. So there are mixed reports at the moment on that. Gareth, let's go on to Sunday's games. Crystal Palace take on Nottingham Forest. How do you see this one going?
A very intriguing game, this, because it'll be interesting to see how Palace cope with a quick turnaround from Thursday night tonight against their Europa League playoff, Europa Conference League playoff. This is their kind of first taste of Thursday, Sunday, so it's good news for them that both games are at home, so there's no real travel involved. But look, Palace will need no encouragement to be up for this game on Sunday. Forest didn't help their case. There was complaints put in as well from Forest, and Forest have angered a lot of people. I think Marinakis has angered a lot of people and his time in the Premier League with Forest. So I think Forest or Palace will definitely be up for this. But I have to say, Forest were really impressive against Brentford. I know it was Brentford, but that first half performance was really, really impressive. Gibbs White was pulling the strings, and again, it was pure jealousy watching. I can't believe I'm saying I'm jealous of Nottingham Forest having a player, but he looked a real top talent.
I feel I feel like most of us Spurs fans, though, Gareth, are going to be like that all season. Whenever you see Morgan Gibbs-White do something brilliant, and he, of course, the opening weekend, he was brilliant for Forest last weekend. And of course, when Eze produces a bit of magic now for Arsenal all season, we're all just going to be sitting there like, that should have been us. That should have been us. All season, we're going to feel like that.
We say it all the time, Chris, don't we? That we're always looking at our clubs and going, why can we not be like that? Because we're supposed to be a big club. That's the reason we moved to the stadium, but hasn't quite materialised like that. But I think this will be a really, really tight game. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
Same. Got it. We've actually agreed for a couple of times. Let me just give you a stat here, although we've gone for 1-1 each. Crystal Palace have never won in 10 previous Premier League meetings with Nottingham Forest, drawing 6 and losing 4. It's both the most they've ever faced a side without winning and the most Forest have faced a side without losing in the competition. So, we've both gone for a 1-1 draw. Yeah. Right. So, next one, Everton v Brighton. Everton, we spoke a little bit about Jack Grealish. He came off the bench against Leeds on Monday evening. Do you think he'll start this one?
Definitely. I think he'll definitely start this one because Everton looked really short in creativity against Leeds the other night. And already Everton seem to start every season like this, where a manager comes in, keeps them up. In fairness to David Moyes, kept them up and very comfortable. Towards the end, it wasn't like Sean Dyche and Frank Lampard, where it kind of went the very last game or the second last game. They were stiff due to the run they were on under Moyes. But, Moyes is starting to say we're a wee bit short again. And Dyche has said this before and Lampard has said this before. And it just seems like every season, Everton do manage to stay up. They don't really kick on and they find themselves back, possibly in an hour scrap. And Goodison Park's been crucial for them. The fact now they moved to this new stadium, will it be a good thing or a bad thing? I think teams will definitely enjoy going to a more open stadium. And Goodison Park is a tough place to go, even when Everton are struggling. I think that could also be to their detriment if they don't strengthen. They're short up front. They've lost Calvert-Lewin, who was injured a lot, but he was still a good source of goals for them and was on a great run last year when Everton were on that run. Grealish will definitely give him creativity. But I don't know. I just get a bad feeling with Everton too, Chris, that this could be an hour of season where the manager that keeps them up, maybe doesn't see out the season and they have to maybe change it up again. They try and get a new bounce. And I don't think Everton can continue like that every season. They're too big of a club to keep chopping and changing managers to avoid relegation.
Well, I was going to ask, Gareth, what would be a good season for Everton this year?
I think they'll just be happy to stay up because there hasn't been money spent. And let's be honest, they're not the most attractive team they watch at times. So I think the fans will just hope they see out this first season and they're back in the Premier League next year. But until they spend, I think, and get a more quality player on, they're going to struggle to really climb the table. I don't see them getting out of the bottom half of the table. I don't think they'll be relegated, Chris. But if they don't get the results under Moyes early on, they'll have no problem changing up because they did it with Sean Dyche and they did it with Frank Lampard.
And we all know it's very difficult to go into a new stadium and get the atmosphere like it was in the old stadium. Now, this will be the first ever competitive game at Everton's Hill Dickinson Stadium, just one of the 10 clubs to have played at 2 different permanent home grounds in the Premier League have lost their first such game at their new home, winning 5 and drawing 4, with Southampton going down 2-0 to Chelsea at St Mary's in August 2001. And this fixture last season finished Everton 0, Brighton 3, and that was in August at the start of the season. What are you going to go for on this one?
I think Everton will be buzzing to get into the new stadium, but I think they could leave actually disappointed. I think Brighton will. I think because Everton are at home, they're going to have to be a bit more progressive, and it could leave gaps for Brighton to exploit. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 Brighton away one.
Oof. I'm going to go 1-1. I tell you, so I think my predictions this week are quite boring. If all my predictions came right, Gareth, it's going to be a boring Premier League weekend. Right. The last game of Sunday is Fulham v Manchester United. You mentioned at the start of the stream how impressed you were with Manchester United against Arsenal. Of course, they were unlucky to lose. They brought in a number of real quality players. What difference did you see and spell out the obvious to me. What differences did you see from last season under Ruben Amorim?
Well, I think they looked a lot more comfortable in that tactical setup that Amorim employs, the 3-4-3. And it looked last year that they really struggled to understand what he was looking for. He's seeing a lot more overlapping from the fullbacks and getting down the wings, and I think they looked a lot more balanced. And the obvious one, Chris, as well, they have a lot more quality with Alexa Mbeumo and Cunha. They looked like they could do something at the top end of the pitch, whereas last year, whenever United got around the box, they never really looked like scoring a lot of the times. And I think Sesko will only come on. I think Sesko will probably start this game as well, and he'll give him a bit more of a threat in the air and aerial in the box. Look, I was very impressed with them. They've set the standard now in terms of what they can't fall below. So, as well as it was a good performance, they didn't get a result. And if they didn't get a result in this game, Amorim all of a sudden becomes under a lot of pressure, because at Man United, you have to get results. And I think he's only won 7 of his 27 Premier League games in charge. So whilst they were impressive last week, if they don't follow that up this week and they lose at Fulham and don't play anywhere near good enough, then all of a sudden Amorim comes under huge pressure.
Gareth, I was going to say the big difference, I think, in the last couple of years with Manchester United, they've spent so much money, but the recruitment hasn't been great. But I feel that the real difference the summer just gone, this transfer window, I feel like has been a really, really good window for them. And they've gone out very similar to what Spurs have tried to do in this window, is they've identified players with Premier League experience, been there, done it, got the T-shirt. They know exactly what they're getting. So you're absolutely right. There's no excuses. When you bring in players of real quality, you need results.
Well, Chris, they got their 3 top targets. We haven't got any of our top 2. And that's the difference. Do you know what I mean? So they wanted Mbeumo and Cunha and got those done quite early, and also got Sesko off Newcastle when it looked like Newcastle had him. And just keep saying it, this is how big club operates. And as you say, the biggest difference they have is Mbeumo and Cunha are Premier League experience, and too many times before they brought on players like Anthony, who didn't really adjust to the league, and it was a big struggle. Whereas I think Spurs fans would love him and love Mbeumo, love Cunha. But yeah, I think United will do okay this year, but they need to get results, fast, because the manager will come under massive pressure if they don't. But in terms of this game, I'm just going to say they're going to have enough to get past Fulham. I'm going to go for a 2-1 United 1.
Yeah, I'm going to go 3-1 United win. And what an interesting stat this is. Fulham have won just 1 of their last 19 Premier League games against Manchester United, drawing 3 and losing 15. So they have a very, very poor record, beating them 2-1 at Old Trafford back in Feb 2024. And this fixture last season finished Fulham 0, Manchester United 1. Last one, Gareth, Monday Night Football, Newcastle take on Liverpool. Isak's definitely not going to be involved in this one.
This is going to be a bank holiday blockbuster, isn't it? Because Newcastle fans are gunning for Liverpool and gunning for Isak, aren't they? So this adds fuel to the fire. I know he won't play for either team, but there's going to be a lot of eyes on this. Look, I'm sure the Newcastle players will want to put out a message to Isak as well that, this is still a big club, Newcastle, and we're still a team on the up, and we still have ambitions to get back into the Champions League again for another year. And maybe won another trophy. And this is the strange thing with Newcastle. You think of winning the League Cup last year and getting into the Champions League, they will be on the up, but their star players looking to leave, and that's what is a big worry for Newcastle. But I think this will be an absolutely brilliant game. I think Liverpool shown us last week they're going to be an open team. Maybe a lot. Last year they were a bit more pragmatic at times, but I think this year with the attacking flair they've got, they're kind of forced to be in more of a front-footed team every week, and there's going to be openings and them transitions. And Newcastle are a very transition team. The one worry would be, Chris, and I've said this, Newcastle haven't got a striker. And I think that's why they're reluctant to sell Isak, because how can you be a Champions League club with not a recognised striker in your squad? Never mind your first 11 with no backup. They wouldn't even have a striker on their squad, so they can't really afford to let Isak go unless they get a replacement, and that looks less and less likely now with time going on, because all the big strikers have kind of moved, and they've obviously missed out on players like Sesko, like Mbeumo, like Ekitike to Liverpool. So the players will want to really perform for Eddie Howe and the fans, and send Liverpool a message that we're not here to be bullied. And I think it'll be a great game, Chris.
Gareth, what's your expectations of Newcastle? What would be a good season for them? Because when you look at how long it was that they didn't win a trophy, very similar, I know there was a 17-year gap for Spurs, but when you look at some of the teams that won trophies last year, Crystal Palace, Spurs and Newcastle, you would hope that those clubs would want to taste that success again and move on and really build for the future and want that success again and again.
Yeah, well, they've brought in Alanga and Ramsey, who I think are decent players, but I don't think it elevates them to a new level. I think that'll be the frustration from Newcastle fans. And if you end up losing Isak, with no real replacement, and if it is Vissa coming in, he's nowhere near the level of an Isak. So they would definitely be weaker in terms of quality, maybe a couple more numbers there. But, they weren't in Europe last year, Newcastle. So they'll have to juggle the Champions League, and they struggled the last time they juggled the Premier League with the Champions League. And that will be the big worry for Newcastle. But look, I think the best thing they can do is they rebuff any more approaches for Isak. Once the window closes, what Isak has said and done and what he's threatening to do, I think will not materialise. It's a World Cup year. Sweden's having a good chance of qualifying. I think he'll have to play games if he wants to be in a squad. You can't not play. So I think when the window closes, and we've seen this before, Chris, where players threaten not to play, and then once the window closes and they don't get a move, there is a way back in. And look, Newcastle fans might hit him right now, but if he was to come on back in a couple of weeks' time and start scoring goals again, and let's be honest, Newcastle struggled against Villa to score goals, and 0-0 draw, and they were crying out for a striker. So there is a route back in for Isak, but I don't think we'll see that until after the window closes. And Liverpool, I mean, if Liverpool want to go out and win this game, they even ruffle the feathers even more. But I'm struggling with this one, Chris. I think it'll be really entertaining, but high scoring, but don't know what way it'll go.
Do you know what? I wrote down 2-1 to Newcastle because I know what a great atmosphere it is at St James's Park, one of the best, one of my favourite places to go, actually, away ground. But I've just changed it to 2-2.
I'm going to go for a Newcastle heartbreaker, 3-2 Liverpool.
3-2 Liverpool. Now, Newcastle finished 5th in the Premier League last season, of course, Champions League spot. Will they finish higher this season, lower, or the same?
I think based on what they have now, and if Isak moves on and no real striker comes in, or if it is just Vissa, I think combined with the Champions League, that's going to be very, very difficult for them. If they can get some business done, they'd be me a shout. But no, I think at the minute, Chris, they'll be looking. If they get 6th place for that squad they have now, they'd be happy and have some form of European football next year.
Simon's just said another draw, Chris. I think I've gone for quite a few, 1, 2, 3, 4. I've gone for 5 draws out of the 10 games.
That's called sitting on the fence. That's the time you're leaving you.
There you go. I'm only going on what I think will happen. So, give me your predictions as well. Gareth, thank you so much for joining me. And I know me and you could talk about football all day long. I know we spoke quite a length about the City v Spurs game. That is going to be a very, very interesting game. Let's hope that Spurs can get a great result up at the Etihad. And like we've mentioned already, let's hope that we can move very, very quickly now in the transfer window, because there isn't long left. Only 11 days left of this transfer window. Gareth, what you got planned for the weekend? Anything good?
Well, I've got football with my own club. I've training now to go to in a half an hour's time. But no, I've got some games on Saturday, games on Monday, and then I'm off then for a couple of weeks because I'm going on holidays next Thursday. So I'll be out in Gran Canaria in the swelter and heat, no doubt, absolutely sweating on deadline day, looking for a Chris Cowlin update of, are we signing any players?
Oh, wow. Simon's gone for a 2-2 as well. So he's also gone for a draw. Top man. And thanks so much for watching all of these updates, Simon. I know I see your name crop up all the time, so thank you. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening, and have a great weekend. Let's hope that it is a good weekend of Premier League football, particularly for Tottenham Hotspur against Manchester City. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we will see you soon. Come on, you Spurs.